Good morning. It's almost the time.
Good morning.
Good morning, Irina.
Morning.
How are you?
I can't hear very well. Can you check your audio selection? In this program? Yeah. Sorry, not that one. The other one. Yeah, that might help too. Yeah. We'll just make sure it's all right. Okay. You're on the right setting. You just have a little more. Bill, can you say something? Say something?
Yeah. Check. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's not very loud. Can you go into your audio settings and Zoom? Yeah.
Let me try it again. If I speak up a little louder, does that help?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, I'll try to speak up.
Thank you.
Morning, Michael.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I was having some trouble with my audio and everything.
Yes, you sound
Okay,
great.
great. Good, okay.
Good morning, Janice. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Bill?
I'm good.
So the
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, did you have a question before we started?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Sudhir.
Oh. Okay. One moment. I'm sorry, is that Sudhir? Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, bear with me a moment and we'll see if we can get you situated, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm just waiting on one more person.
Irina, we're still, I assume, waiting for Renee, Amy.
Yeah, I'm just gonna Yes.
Morning, Richard. How are you? Good morning, Mia.
Good morning. Delayed response here, sorry.
No problem. Small committee today.
Yeah, it looks like we have 5 voting members.
Pam has been contacted. I don't know if you want to wait a couple minutes or get started since you have 5 members.
We are still waiting on one of the members, so our staff is going to contact him and find out. So looks like we can get Renee Amy at least now. So our staff tried to contact him, left a voicemail and send an email. So and that's 9:07 already. So should we start or wait?
Excuse me, I'm fine with starting. I assume with a quorum, we can still move forward with this.
Yeah, well, we can move forward. We are just down to 4 voting members for now.
Well, that means everybody has to make motions and second them a lot. So I think
We got
oh,
Renee.
there we go. Good morning, Renee. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
There we go. Good morning. Good to have you on the team.
And I apologize for being late. I really do. Life is full and I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit, but I will be here. So I'll be on mute. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
And I think we'll go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome you all and thank you for coming today. I'm Bill Zelmer, the chair of the Health Facilities Code Advisory Committee. I'm calling this meeting to order. It is 9:09 on January 31, 2023. Ms. Irina Brosman, would you please call the roll?
Yep. So Bill Zellner,
Here.
David Phil,
Here.
Rene Amy,
Here.
Sadir Agrawal, I see you here.
Here.
Michael Stone,
Here,
Cheryl Domnich, Sharon Goey, Janice Chen,
Here.
Dana Johnson,
Here.
hey, we have 2 members absent.
Thank you, Irina. Do we have a quorum for the meeting?
Yes,
Irina, would you also please read the meeting information and instructions?
yes, of course. So good morning, everyone. I am Irina Brausman, Associate Architect with the California Building Standards Commission, and will be assisting the chairperson throughout the meeting. I would also like to introduce the other CBSC staff in attendance. Barbara Trustley, who will help us with the public comments received during the meeting. Other CBSC staff are on Zoom, including the Executive Director, Mia Marvelli, and our Deputy Executive Director, Kevin Day. There is an open public meet. This is an open public meeting of the CBSC Health Facilities, HF Code Advisory Committee. The purpose of this meeting is to ensure public participation in the development of the proposed building standards and to ensure adequate technical review of the proposed building standards submitted for this committee's review prior to being evaluated by the CBSC commissioners for adoption. The proposed building standards are required to comply with specific criteria listed in the Health and Safety Code section 18930, commonly known as the 9-point criteria. The committee members can find the 9-point criteria listed in the Code Advisory Committee meeting procedures and references provided as part of the materials for this meeting. The members of the public can find 9-point criteria posted on the HF CAC meeting webpage linked on the meeting agenda. Recommendations are restricted to approve, approve as amended, disapprove, or return for further study. Propositions to approve as amended, disapprove, or return for further study, the commenter must identify which one or more of the required 9-point criteria the proposed code change has failed to satisfy and provide your rationale. Comments must be restricted to one or more of the required 9-point criteria. The meeting is being held remotely, consistent with Senate Bill 189, which authorizes the state body to hold public meetings, approve teleconferencing, and to make public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically. Today's meeting can be viewed in Zoom webinar and on the CBSC YouTube channel, linked on the meeting agenda. I would like to remind the YouTube viewer there is 45 seconds or so delay. Real-time closed captioning is available via automated live transcriptions in both Zoom and YouTube. The public may provide comments on each agenda item by calling in on the Zoom teleconference number provided on the meeting agenda, or by using the raised hand feature in Zoom. Instructions are provided on the CBSC webpage. If you have difficulty with technology, call the CBSC office at 916-263-0916. I will now read the public comment and Zoom instructions. If you wish to make a comment on the specific agenda item, please listen for the committee chair to ask for any comments from the public. The chair will first go through the Zoom participants that have raised their hands. Then the committee chair will take comments from the public
And
on the Zoom phone line. At this time, please take yourself off of mute. You may choose to announce your name and who you are representing before making your comment. Please mute yourself when done commenting. The chair will continue through the call queue until there are no questions remaining. The committee will then proceed to the next agenda item. If possible, please call from the landline using the telephone handset only. This enhances the committee's ability to hear your comments clearly. Calling from the speakerphone or cell phone reduces the quality of the audio and makes it much harder for your comments to be heard clearly. Staff will summarize any written comments that were received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, January 24, 2023. That's it.
Had to come off of mute. Okay, thank you very much, Irina. The next agenda item is item number 2, our overview, meeting schedule and housekeeping. A, staying on schedule is everyone's responsibility. Please honor time limits when they are identified. B, I will call for the state proposing agency to address the committee and explain the proposed building standard. C, the committee will discuss each agenda item, then I will call for public comments. Please avoid duplicating comments in their entirety. Support or non-support may be expressed for specific comments. Following all comments and discussion, I will call for a motion and second to recommend action on each agenda item relating to proposed building standards. A roll call vote will be taken for each motion. Please stay on the subject matter being discussed and avoid sidebars. Extraneous discussions disrupt the flow of the meeting and can be hard for persons on the telephone to understand who is speaking and what is being discussed. Please be respectful of others' time and opinion and avoid interruptions. We will take a lunch break around noontime, and the committee will decide on a good stopping point as the meeting progresses. Agenda item 3, comments from the public on issues not on this agenda. Comments regarding items not on this agenda may be briefly discussed, but no action may be taken by the committee. At this time, I would like to remind the public who wish to speak on item 3 to put yourself in the queue now by using the raised hand feature on Zoom, or listen for the chair to ask for comments from the phone and unmute yourself at that time. If you would like to identify yourself, please clearly state your name and who you represent. Barbara, please check Zoom and then the phone for commenters on agenda item 3.
At this time, we don't have any hands raised and we don't have any phone participants.
Thank you. So this concludes agenda item 3. And on to agenda item number 4. I would like to nominate a vice chair at this time, David Field. David, do you accept?
I accept. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And finally, I think we're ready to move on to the actual business of the day. We want to welcome Richard Tannehill from OSHPD, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. And Richard, would you like to introduce yourself? And let's see, let me check one thing here before we move forward. I have to check with the script. So,
Bill,
yes, ma'am.
I think as you nominated the new vice chair, you need to vote on that.
Oh, we do. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'd like to request a vote on David Field as the vice chair.
I'll second it. This is Sudhir.
So Irina, do you go through the roll call or do we just do a voice vote?
Yes, I will do a roll call.
Thank you.
So Bill Zelmer,
Yes, I approve.
David Phil,
Yes.
Rene Amy,
Yes.
Sadir Agrawal,
Yes.
Michael Stone.
Yes.
Okay, pass.
Okay, it looks like I do have a little more script. Next on the agenda is item 5, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. Proposed adoption of amendments to the 2022 California Administrative Code, Part 1, Chapter 7. OSHPD representative, please introduce yourself and present the proposal for item 5. Please indicate the Commission Action Matrix Table number or CAM number, the section number and section name of the items presented or discussed to make it easier to follow the discussion. It may also be helpful to also indicate the initial express terms page where the discussed section is located. The CAM, express terms, and initial statement of reasons can be found posted on the Health Facilities CAC meeting webpage link on the meeting agenda. Richard, I'd like to open it up to you at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committees. I just want to make sure you can hear me. We had a power outage this morning, so we just want to make sure everything's working okay. Okay. Hello, I'm Richard Tannehill. I'm the Deputy Division Chief for OSHPD and the Acting Supervisor for the Building Standards Unit. This proposal is for the 2022 Intervening California Administrative Code, Part 1. Proposed amendments were presented to the Hospital Building Safety Board Codes and Processes Committee on July 14th, 2022 and October 13th, 2022. As a high-end summary of what we'll be looking at today, we're providing clarifications, amending definitions related to managed projects and start of construction, removing requirements for paper plan review submittals, providing clarification on the services allowed by the architect's license, adding language for deadlines to upload drawings and return back checks based on project cost, amending fees for geotechnical and geohazard reviews as non-refundable after the review has been completed. Also adding processes to review and bill projects with no construction or reduction in scope to be billed at cost, and adding a section to clarify the responsibilities and the inspectors of record. That was a very high overview. I thank you for your time and consideration for approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or go over any items that's being proposed.
Thank you, Richard. So a couple of items, and I may want to ask Irina for guidance also. Items 1 and 2 were previously reviewed by another committee, so we skipped to item 3 to start with, correct?
They will be reviewed. Yeah.
They will be reviewed by
the
another committee. Okay. So Richard, the way that you presented that, you didn't go through item by item, so.
No, it was a brief overview.
So was the plan to then break this down one at a time?
Yes, we can go through either item by item, or we can group them, the items that are similar if you'd like.
Okay. Let me pause there for a moment. Sudhir has his hand up. Sudhir?
Just want to make sure that this is 6 pages on the CAM. That the right one?
Yes, there are 6 pages.
Thank you.
Okay, if you'd like, I can start at item 1 or 3.
Probably item 3.
Yeah.
So I want to check in. So some of this is new, doing this online. Do we want to share the text on screen, the express terms, so that we can follow it visually while Richard describes it? Does the Building Standards Commission have a preference?
We don't usually do that, to share the screen with express terms.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm going to go back and forth between looking at our committee and then looking at the terms. I know at least on my second screen. So if that's not what's normally done, we'll do what is normally done. So yeah, Richard, if you could start with item 3. And I like the idea, one last point here, to group things just for the sake of moving through the information at a reasonably quick pace. We may want to group things as we go. So go ahead and get started, present item 1, item 3. And if you think it makes sense, move on to item 4 and so forth.
Actually, if I may, Mr. Chair, I can include items 3, 4, 5, and 6 are very similar.
That
And I
sounds
can Go
great.
through them, and I can answer any questions.
Please do.
Okay, starting out with the item 3. The definition of managed project, we're removing the words and construction, just because managed projects do not apply to a project that's under construction. It's only plan review. So for the definition of start of construction, there was some redundancy. There was the placement of permanent constructions. We're just removing the word placement.
Thank you. Move on to item 4.
For item 4, we're removing the requirements for electronics, for paper submittal. So there's modifications to clarify electronic, the number of copies, and the removal of paper. And I'll just go through those, and I can answer any questions on those. So for item 4 under A1, the application shall be electronic and contain definite identifying name. So just adding the shall be electronic in that paragraph. So item 2, again, adding the term shall be electronic for the submission of documents, the office shall be electronic. And for the 2A, for the geotechnical review, it used to say there was to identify the number of copies. So we're saying an application for plan review, when applicable, the site data must be attached, removing the requirements for any copies to be uploaded since it's all electronic now. And there used to be the option for plans to be submitted electronically, and that's being removed since they're being submitted electronically anyway. For 2B, for a preliminary review, again, removing the requirement, the option for drawings to be submitted electronically or paper, since they'll be submitted electronically, and removing the requirements for paper submittals for weight and size. For item 2C, again, removing the option for drawings to be submitted electronically, same thing as B above, and removing the requirements for paper submittals, weight and size. And then going down to C1, we're adding the term architectural in front of building. And let me just explain that real quick. When we look at buildings, a building is a seismically separated building. When the general public looks at a building, it's considered an architectural building as a whole. So a hospital may be comprised of several seismic buildings, but when we look at it, or the public look at it, it's one building, and that's the architectural building. So what this is basically identifying that projects may be divided into parts, provided that each part is clearly defined by an architectural building or similar distinct unit. We've had people interpreting that when it used to say just building, that they could only have a project that was within one of the seismic components. So this will allow the project to be hospital-wide. So item 5, if I may. Item 5, again, under A, we're removing the requirement for plans and drawings to be submitted to the office, size and weight. And then jumping down to B1, it states that we're adding the language under the structural construction documents or reports shall be prepared by a structural engineer. We're adding the inclusion that architects may prepare construction documents and reports as permitted by their license. Without that there, previously, it was prohibiting a lot of architects from doing any type of calculations or work that they would normally do on any other type of project. So that the intent was not to restrict architects from doing work, but basically they can't do the structural frame, but they can do other types of work in the hospital. So that as long as it's allowed by their license, so we're adding that language. And then item 6 is removing 3 copies from the text, just saying the site data reports shall be furnished. And I will stop there. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Richard. So I'd like to open it up to the committee for discussion. Looks like we have a hand up from Sudhir.
You're muted, Sudhir.
So can we, instead of architectural building on the item 4C, can we say hospital building and associated components, something like that? And
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, go ahead.
The actual term that's publicly known as architectural building. It's not specific to hospitals.
Okay. Okay, and on the next one, where it says architect or engineer is acceptable, but at the same time, on the item 5, part 2, if we allow the architect to control and sign off on the project, it is in conflict with the PE expectation requirement, because not every electrical engineer is qualified for all discipline, or not any mechanical or any other discipline. They are qualified for all buildings. So I don't know how you want to propose it. Architect cannot qualify for all discipline. And that is also on the same item 5 on paragraph 1 on the next page.
So Sudhir, I want to be clear. For myself, I'm a little lost.
Sure.
The only things that we're allowed to discuss are the specific changes proposed by OSHPROD. Can you identify the item number that we're discussing? This is item 5.
Well, okay, yes. So first of all, it started with the architectural building. So if we are using architectural building is acceptable, but if we go further and associate item 4 with item 5, where it talks about architects and engineers, like item on page 9 on item 1 or item 2, the mechanical, electrical are not, or architect is not qualified to make a determination for all disciplines. This is in conflict with the PE requirements.
So I got to admit, I'm still not clear.
So I mean,
I'm
go to
looking at
item
the
by item.
express terms. A 20-page document on page 8 and 9 is item number 5. Which
Item number 5, yes, item number 5.
So
Page
please
8 and
clarify
9. Go ahead.
the paragraph that you're talking about. is which one?
Paragraph on item 5 on page 8, even though it is not marked, but since it came from item 4, part 1, that relates to item 2 of item 5 and item 1 on 2B1 of
Let
item
me
5.
try to approach this differently. On item 5,
Mhm.
the first element from Oshpod is crossing out the words plans, drawings submitted to the office. Are you referring to that?
No, I'm not. I'm okay with that.
So then on the next page, there's a new sentence Oshpod is adding under sub-item number 1.
Correct.
Architects may prepare. Is that the part you're speaking to?
Yes.
Okay.
And that item is associated with mechanical engineering or the electrical engineering or the civil engineering, giving the responsibility to architect, which in my opinion may not be the best qualification of the architect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, I'm not sure I follow either, but I'll try to explain, because the architects are allowed to do structural work by their license, but they are limited in what they can do. And all this is saying is that they are allowed to do, prepare construction documents and reports for structural, as long as they're licensed, under their license, the allowance under their license. Without this statement there, it was determined that architects cannot do any structural construction documents. So this will allow them to do work under the authority of their license.
Structural, I agree, okay. But when it comes to mechanical and electrical, if we look into the PE code or the requirement, it does not authorize them unless it is like a 2,000 square feet and less building. And they are,
So we're not, I agree with you, we're not adding it to the mechanical and electrical component.
I'll leave it up to the committee, whatever they decide.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
feeling a little uncomfortable being a mechanical engineer myself, that we are allowing architect to make decisions for other discipline. I can understand about structural, but preparing the document and taking the responsibility.
That's not what we're adding them.
Okay, no, I know, but it all comes into the item 5 in various sections, whether they are marked or not, but it started out with architectural building and then goes into the paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and on item 5. So
Thank you, sir.
whatever
Let
committee
me,
decides, I'm okay with that.
David has his hand up. David?
Thanks, Bill. So help me understand this just so I can be clear. So as part of our process here, we've been provided this document, we're only commenting on the changes which are being made. So that would be items in the PT1 document where it's been struck through, which that's being deleted, or underlined in the case of this point 1 where text has been added. So that's really where we're commenting. So in instance, this section 2, that wouldn't be something that we could really comment on because that's not a change. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Well, I think that, I guess my first comment is that the only thing that this addition is allowing is architects to practice as they've been licensed to practice. So, just as an architect, I think that makes a lot of sense, I'll say. So the code isn't allowing architects to act outside of what the state has already decided they're capable of doing. With that, I think this is a great package. I think looking at this as a whole was a good idea. And I just like to set a motion that we accept these as a group.
Thank you. Thank you, David. So I will add to that, my comment. I took a moment to do a little research. There is a definition in the part one for structural elements as well as structural repair. I understand this to be in the context of when an architect is doing work. I think our part one is clear in that item one to read from it directly. The structural construction documents or reports shall be prepared by a structural engineer. To me, that's pretty clear. Architects may prepare, the sentence being added is architects may prepare construction documents and reports as permitted by their license. And the issue is there are projects that are remodeling where the question comes up, is an architect allowed to touch this or touch that if it's a column or a beam? And this sentence is saying architects may prepare construction documents and reports as permitted by their license. I'm in support of this wording from my perspective. Further comments from the committee?
So can we add the word as permitted by their license somewhere? Will that help? I mean, to clarify my understanding, because the mechanical, electrical is all over and they are all associated within the same item. I'm okay whichever way the committee wants to go.
May I respond? The added language is only for item one, not for item two. It does not affect item two.
So to be clear, this is strictly structural under item number one.
And where this is coming from, as Bill was stating, is that we do have remodel projects that architects are told that they cannot provide anchorage for a simple piece of equipment or do a wood joist because it's considered structural. And they are allowed by their license to do that type of work. And so this is adds that allowance. It does not affect mechanical or electrical at all.
According to the changes, I agree with that. I have no comment on that because they are not marked in the document. However, the overall implication of item 4 and 5 relates to mechanical, electrical. So whichever way committee wants to go, I'll accept it.
Thank you, Sudhir. So we have items 3, 4, 5, and 6 that Richard has presented. Unless we have further comments from the committee, I'd like to ask for comments from the public. I'm sorry, Janice, I didn't see your hand up. Janice?
I just put mine up. I just wanted to make sure the discussion regarding the licensing was over before I brought this up. My question is with regards to item number 4, pod 01/22-4-2, code section 7-113C, with regard to the introduction of the word architectural to distinguish between the architectural building and the seismically separated building. My question is if that is reflected under definitions anywhere. I see that, when I go back to part 2, I see that there's a definition for building, and that's clear. Back to part 1, there is a definition. There's actually a lot of language that talks about hospital buildings specifically. My only concern is that if you do introduce architectural building versus seismically separated building, that clarity is provided in addition to the intent. I understand the intent. My only concern is that when that language is introduced, is if that would be clear to anyone else that reads it so that it is understood in that way.
As you mentioned, a hospital building is actually the seismically separated building. So a hospital can be consisted of 5, 6, 7 hospital buildings. Because the hospital buildings by definition are standalone or seismically separated components. So the architectural building would be the all-encompassing.
I think what Janice is suggesting is that we add that definition into part 1.
I'll add my 2 cents worth. Bill Zellmer with Sutter Health. I see the point that you're making, Janice, and as I read through this last week, I shared the same comment, the concern. I don't think in the context that it is in this paragraph, it's going to matter much. The context of this is that a project may be divided into whatever form this says it can be. And adding the words architectural building, as Richard described. I get what they're trying to do. Maybe it could be more clearly worded, but this is the wording that we have.
Again, this is to provide the flexibility, because we've had people submitting projects separately just because they span a seismic separation, and that's not the intent.
Further comments from the committee?
I think I support Janice that adding, and everybody else, that adding a definition architectural building in section 1 may help, even though it is not part of our agenda for today to approve or disapprove. But whichever way it works for us, but I'm okay with that.
Thank you, Sudhir. Any further comments from the committee? And then I'll open it up to the public. No further comments from the committee. Then I'm going to go ahead and ask, do we have any comments from the public? Is anybody in queue?
Don't see any hands raised, and we have no phone participants right now.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to entertain any motions. I'd like to encourage as much all-inclusive motions for items 3, 4, 5, and 6 if possible, but I'll leave it to each of you.
So I move that item 3, 4, and 5, 6 be approved as submitted with a caveat that somewhere a definition of architectural building be added, which is not part of 3, 4, 5, 6. It is separate into item 1.
So I think we may have an issue with that, Steer.
Okay.
We have just the options of approve as amended, deny, and
Approved.
further study.
So I take it
So-
back. So I'll say, okay, approved as
Okay.
submitted.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
So let's open it back up to discussion. Any further discussion? Richard, do you want to respond? I think the issues are all out on the table at this point.
I would like to respond. I did make a note that we will look into adding a definition in a future cycle for architectural building. I did get a message from one of our teammates, and NFPA does refer to them as architectural buildings. So we will look at that and see if we're in alignment. Well, I know we're in alignment, but we'll just see either use the same definition or provide one. So it's a good point. Thank you.
Further discussion from the committee? Hearing none, I think we're ready to go to a vote. So Arena,
Okay, Bill Zelmer,
I approve.
David Phil,
I approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sudhir Agrawal,
Approved.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
motion passed.
All right, Richard, back to you.
All right, thank you. So I'm just looking through my items, see if I can group some more. Item 7. Eight and 9.
Okay.
Through
Sounds
those.
good.
Okay, so for item 7, we had references to the Facility Guidelines Institute. They have since stopped changed the way that the guides are sold, so we're updating the name of the guide to Guidelines for Design and Construction Hospitals and Outpatient Facilities. And as well as the following paragraph with the Behavioral Health Design Guide. Again, that's no longer in FGI, Facilities Guidelines, so we're just updating the titles of those references, those resources. For item 8, there's some, the first one is we're adding what's kind of in our policy is for once a application is submitted, you have 10 days to upload the drawings electronically. So we're just adding that language. And then also we're removing the requirements for a set of prints to be submitted, again, electronic, as well as you used to be able to write written responses directly on the drawings. That's no longer possible electronics. We're removing that option. And for number 9, we're basically saying this is to actually help the facilities close out a project sooner. We're allowing 90 days to close out a project. Some of these last a year or two, because the project's done, construction's done, everyone moves on, the project is left open indefinitely. So we're putting a 90-day deadline to get the projects closed out in compliance. So we have a language there to a new paragraph being added to address that.
And that wraps up 7, 8, and 9. So before I open it up to the committee for discussion, I want to just check in with you all. Is everybody comfortably following your own express terms on your own computer screen and then following Richard as he presents all of this? Everybody's doing all right?
Yes.
I know in some of these meetings in the past, I've found myself a little lost. So everybody's all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Doing
Then I want
good.
to open it up for comment. Your hand is up.
Okay, so on the item 7, paragraph C, at the bottom where it talks about guidelines published by New York State Office of Mental Health. Since it is outside the California, it's not California code or reference on that. Is there an appendix or something where this document is contained within the OSPOD needs, or should we attach a copy of it? That's the only comment I have. Other than that, yeah, that's it.
Yes, I would like to respond to that. First of all, we're not changing that language. New York State actually has a very good guidelines on psychiatric hospitals, and that is actually used as a model for all other guides that are being put out there. But what we're doing in this case is just the design guide for built environment and behavioral health facilities no longer available or no longer published by FGI. So we're just correcting that title. We're not changing. The guide for New York's is available online, but this is just other information that could be considered. It's not a requirement of any sort. And it's just correcting outdated information.
Thank you.
Further comments from the committee?
All good.
All good. Renee, is that you? You're good?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my mic was on. My apologies.
No problem.
It happens, right? Not the first time.
It happens. Okay. So I have a comment myself, but I kind of want to see if there's other committee comments. I will say on item 8, the 10 days seems reasonable to me. After you submit the paperwork, you need to submit the substance of the project. My only comment on these three then is on item number 9. And for the sake of clarity, let's see. This is under section 7-129, the time limitations. The final closeout documentation part. Richard, could you clarify? I was trying at home reviewing this to identify what exactly the final closeout documents consist of. I came up with final verified reports, and there's a whole accounting of the fees. And I'm not sure what else is included in that term, final closeout documentation.
Exactly what you're stating, Bill. It'd be the final TIO, final verified reports, final construction costs. And that's really about it. So we just close out. Because again, like what I was saying, once the project's done, people move on. And there may be exceptions to this where there is a dispute between the owner and the contractor what the final cost would be, and we would continue to work with them on that. But the whole idea is to get these closed out in compliance, because it actually affects the facilities later on when they try to do other work and they have open projects in that area.
Thank you. Okay, those are all my comments on these three. Anything further from the committee? At this time, I'd like to then ask, do we have any comments from the public? Irina?
No hands raised and no phone calls.
All right, thank you. Then I'd like to entertain a motion for items 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, I'll move it to the 7, 9, and 8, 7, 8, and 9 be approved as submitted.
To do your motion, do we have a second?
Second,
Renee, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, to move to a vote.
Bill Zellner,
I approve.
David Field,
I approve.
Renee Amy,
approve,
Nadir Agrawal,
I approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
passed.
All right, Richard, back to you.
Thank you. Going on to 10, 11, and 12. Grab those. Okay, item 10, we're just adding the word "and" in there because there's a list of requirement, master plan identifying the work to be completed in each increment and an estimated cost for construction for each increment. It was always assumed as an or. We actually need both of them, so we're just adding the "and" in there. Under item 11, just stating as on other applications that the fee for the geotech hazard report is non-refundable. What happens there is we do the review, it gets approved, and then the project dies and they ask for a refund, but we actually did the work. Further down, for cost reductions for projects that are a reduction in cost, the office shall charge actual cost for review and approval. Total cost paid for these review service will be non-refundable. Again, the work is being done, and the fact that we review an ED and then they remove it from the project, we have to go back and re-review it. So it's just time and materials at that point. So it's just the actual cost incurred due to that removal of work. Projects with no construction are actually been a lot more common now that we have the OSHPD 1R buildings where they're moving stuff in, but they still have to be reviewed. And our review costs are based on construction cost. So if you have a cost with zero construction, the review cost would be zero. So we're just asking that the actual, there'd be time and material actual cost of that review for those projects to compensate for the time spent, the effort put forward. And then item 12 is just test inspection observation. We don't approve them, they're accepted. So we're just changing the word approval to acceptance. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Richard. That's 10, 11, and 12. So we're opening it up to the committee. Sudhir, I see you have your hand up.
Boy, I probably have my hands up on my head.
It's okay.
I have just a comment, maybe pardon my ignorance. I thought the architect or geotechnical fee on item 11 is submitted to the architect, not to Ashford. So maybe my ignorance about this knowledge.
There is a geotech review fee that's already in the code. It is might be submitted through the architect, but they are submitted to us. And they actually, we do have internal geotech reviews as we also work with the Department of Geology.
Like other costs which you have on item 1 and 2 on the next page versus a geotech report review looks like 5,000, looks a little too high, even though it is not marked for changes, but compared to 250 and 5,000, I don't know. I thought this 5,000 is paid to the architect and architect submits to the Ashford. So pardon my ignorance.
I wouldn't call you ignorant.
Further comments from the committee? So I will add my own comment then under item 11, the paragraph, the last paragraph, item or paragraph R, projects with no construction. I think that is fantastic. We do have these come up from time to time. There's always a question, what do you do when your project is a no construction project? So this makes it clear.
Thank you.
Okay, one more time, any comments from the public before, from the committee before we move to the public? Hearing none, do we have any comments from the public, Irina?
No hands from the public and no phone participants.
Thank
And
you.
Bill, I would just remind the public that they need to put them in the queue before you ask for the public comments. If you can do that, that would be great.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you very much. So back on items 10, 11, and 12, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Yeah, nobody's starting it. So I propose that item 10, 11, and 12 be approved as submitted.
Second,
Second,
thank you, Renee. Do we have any further comments? Hearing none, I'd like to move to a vote.
So Bill Zellner,
Approve.
David Bill,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
approve,
Sudhir Agrawal,
Approved.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
Thank you. Pass.
Mr. Chair, I got one quick one to mention about the 9-point criteria.
Yes,
On
please.
these items which we have approved, we should put down like item 2 and 3 of 9-point criteria.
We only need to cite the criteria when we disapprove.
Oh, okay.
Then we have to explain why we disapprove. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
basically, if that's anything then approved, then you will need 9-point criteria.
So the assumption is they've complied with all 9 criteria when we approve it.
Okay, I would like to take item 13 alone as a standalone.
Okay,
Basically, we're just adding some requirements for inspection here. It's more about the relationships between an inspector and the contractor and other services. So for 7-144A, which talks about the hospital having the authority to hire the inspector and that they shall have no, the relationship shall be separate. We're adding an inspector of record associated with the project shall not have any current employment relationships with any entity which is a contracting party for the construction of the project or providing any services for the hospital other than those required of the IOR. Paragraph B, we're adding the language, project inspectors are prohibited from any project activities involving actual performance of construction or the scheduling, coordination, or supervision of construction contractors for the project. Item or paragraph C, the project inspector shall be capable of performing all essential functions of the job. And D, adding a language, and this is for, I'll go through the whole paragraph. When the hospital governing board of authority proposes more than one IOR for a construction project, the lead IOR shall be identified to coordinate construction inspection and communication with the office. So the language we're adding is to follow on to that to clarify those roles. The lead IOR must be allocated the majority of their time on a project inspection responsibilities that are identified in the IOR responsibility matrix on the approved TIO program. The lead IOR approved for the project must be present on site to obtain personal knowledge, ensure continuous inspection, to coordinate the inspection responsibilities of additional IORs, and to verify that all required documentation is being maintained on site in construction of the project, inclusive of the coordination of special inspectors, testing, and project-specific approved testing agencies. The employment of special inspectors or assistant inspectors shall not be construed as relieving the project inspector of his or her duties and responsibilities. And the reason this is coming about, we have a lot more inspection firms, if you will, that have multiple IORs that are either sent out to different facilities or they work under the direction of a lead for the larger projects. And we just want to make sure that the inspectors that are on site are doing inspection duties and doing what they're supposed to do and not just farming out, if you will, inspectors to different locations that they do have to, as an inspector, you do have to be knowledgeable of the work going on at the site. And then the last E is just a renumbering of the E.
All right, thank you, Richard. So opening it up to the committee for comment or questions for Richard.
My hands is up. So two questions rather. On part A, it talks about current employment. I think most places when they switch gears from one agency to another agency or one place to another, there's a limitation of 1 year, meaning for 1 year, they may be switched from one place to another yesterday. So I think intent, to clarify the intent, if we say current or past 1 year will be a better word. That is on item A. B, have no comment. C, project inspectors shall be capable of performing all essential inspection functions. I want to, because the in between the line when I'm reading it, that they should be able to perform the construction permits. They are not qualified for it. So inspection of the job. I think that's the two. Those are the two comments I have.
Thank you, Sudhir. Richard, did you want to comment on that? Respond?
Yeah, the requirement for 1 year, I know that is a requirement if you're with like a state agency and you separate, there is a requirement that you wait for 1 year. But if you're in private sector, that requirement does not exist that I know of. I think that would be a contractual thing with the owner and the inspector. An inspector can leave one project and go to another or take a different role. That is not prohibited. But you're correct with the, like if I left here, I have to wait 1 year before I can go out and work on a project and represent Oshpod. The second part of that, actually I wrote it down. The essential functions of the job would be the inspector's job. So the project inspector shall be capable of performing all essential functions of the job. That's his job. If you wish, we can clarify that language to say that for the his or her job, or the inspector's job, or all essential
Inspection.
functions. We can do that if you want to do that as approved as modified.
Sure.
Janice, your hand is up.
Yeah, is a project inspector considered synonymous with inspector of record or IOR?
Yeah, so we tried to make that change prior to this, and so we're hoping we'll get some public comments on that, but yes. Or if
Okay.
you want to suggest it, we can maybe consider that, because we did want to change that.
Yeah, I think consistency would be great and appreciated. And then super minor, I'm looking at the initial express terms document, and in the 7-144 inspection section, paragraph A, your first term where you have underlined an inspector or record, that's what it shows in my document, and I believe you
Inspector
intended
of. Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, good catch. I must have read this 100 times. I never saw that.
First set of eyes. Any other comments from our committee? Hearing none. If anybody from the public has comment, please get in the queue. As they do, I'll add my own comment, which in this case is, I have no comment.
Are no hands raised, and no phone participants?
Thank you. Then at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion from the committee.
I move that item 13 be approved with the modification of changing paragraph C by inserting the word inspection functions. So inspection,
That'll be an approved as amended.
approved as amended. Yes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
May I say something, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
I would like to pick up Janice's comment as well, but inspector,
Yes, sorry.
special project inspector be changed to inspector of record.
Yes,
Perfect.
please.
Thank you, Richard.
So you can amend my motion to include that.
And that would be all occurrence as a project inspector on this, if I could.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Any discussion by the committee? Hearing none, let's go to a vote.
We need 9-point criteria.
Oh, thank you. Okay, 9-point criteria, severe
2 and 3.
criteria 2 and 3.
And even 4 is also good. 2, 3, 4.
Okay, Irina, are we ready to go to the vote?
So, so there is that 3, 4, and 6, or you picked just one? Just clarify.
3, 4, and 5, or 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, Bill Zelmer,
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I approve.
David Phil,
Approve.
Rene Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
Ross.
So I see we've got Mia has her hand up. Mia?
Yeah, I might have missed it, but who was the second? I heard that Sadir was,
Renee.
thank you. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay, Richard, back to you. So we've got remaining in part one, we have items 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Yeah, I would like to do 14, 15, and 16 together, if I may.
Of course.
Okay, item 14, again, just removing electronic and the paper requirements for the copies of paper. And on item 4 of the same, or sorry, I should say, I call those items. So paragraph 4, CB4, would you revise, this is the requirement for non-material altered. It previously stated that new details based on other approved details are in whole or in part, including reference standards. We really want to focus that on the reference standards. It's been causing a lot of problems in the field. So we just want to reword that to say that new details that are reference standards and pre-approved details or based on other approved reference standards or pre-approved details will be allowed to be NMAs. That makes sense. The way I read it was like confusing. So, so item 15 is just changing the word inspection to review. Office of shall schedule a final state agency review of the work, not we don't inspect the work. And then item 16 is changing the name of OSHPD to HCAI on this for just this one reference. And then for the fees under 7-206, same thing, revising the name. And then adding fees for late fees, recertification, retest, and rescheduling fees for the IOR exams. And then E1, if the applicant cancels or reschedules the examination, they shall pay a fee to reschedule. So it goes back to the reschedule fee above. And then same with the late fee. The definition of late fee shall be submitted to the by the applicant. The recertification application was marked after the final date. Going down to 7-211. So they just submit a recertification application and exam fee, not just an exam fee, which was previously, they have to reapply to test. In 7-2-12. The item 4, the hospital inspector is committed to a workload outside the specified hospital construction project and is able to allot adequate time to perform the work and fulfill all IOR responsibilities on specified construction as determined. This is the requirement that they, an IOR may have other jobs or other responsibilities elsewhere. They're stating that they have to fulfill all the IOR responsibilities for this project. And then under D, the office may withdraw the inspector's approval due to failure to comply with any part of 7-145, which is all the IOR's responsibilities. And that's it.
Okay, so that's 14, 15, and 16. So back to the committee. Do we have any comment from the committee? So if anybody from the public has a comment on this, please get in the queue at this time. As I look through this, I'm in support of all of this. As I glance through it, I don't see it. I do have one question for you, Richard, just a question. I noticed you're changing the name OSHPD in this one location, the HCAI, but I've seen it elsewhere throughout the other documents. Is there a reason for that? To be
Probably just opportunity right here. That basically it's talking about contact with the office under 7-201. And the office is now the department. It actually,
okay.
That's why we're doing it as you know, the fees are going to HCAI now. They're not going to OSHPD, even though we are, that's not to confuse things, but FDD is now OSHPD. But the fees, everything goes to HCAI. So because of the context here, I wanted to make sure that was picked up at this location. The good news is, well, especially for Mia and Irina, we don't have to go back and change everything in the code to HCAC.
Thumbs up. Okay, so I think we've given enough time for the public to get in queue. Do we have any public comments?
There are no hands raised and no phone participants.
Okay, then back to the committee. I'd like to entertain a motion on 14, 15, and 16.
Motion to approve, Mike Stone.
Second,
Do we have any further commentary by the committee? Hearing none, let's go to a vote.
Bill Zolber,
I approve.
David Hill,
Approve.
Rene Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
approve,
Michael Stone,
Approve.
okay, motion carried.
Richard, back to you.
All right, I was going to do 17 alone, but we only have 18 after that. So we'll do 17 and 18 together and part one.
Okay,
For item 17, we're adding a whole section on under 7-215 for conduct relative performance. This is just a requirements for the IORs to basically, you probably saw earlier, we have a lot of things about performance requirements for the inspectors, and this is basically putting it into a clear definition of that requirement based on their certification. Item 18 is for emergency projects only, and it just states again that once a request for emergency repairs are submitted, that within 10 days of the temporary authorization, they need to submit the project. And also, because of the urgency of the emergency, back check shall be submitted within 10 days. We get requests for emergency projects and we don't see drawings for 3 or 4 months. That's no longer an emergency. So we're just putting the urgency into that. And just, again, it just helps us to process these emergency projects a lot faster and to benefit not only us, but the facility to make sure everything's getting done properly and inspected appropriately.
okay, thank you. I do want to note at this time, it's my intention when we finish 17 and 18 to take a break for bio 5 or 10 minutes. Just so you know, a little bit ahead of time. So back to the committee, items 17 and 18. Do we have any comments? Okay, hearing none, I've got a comment. So Richard, on item 18, I wanted to discuss the 10 days. To be honest, I have a bit of an issue with the 10 days. I don't have a problem with the concept. I get that when there's an emergency, once the emergency is over, I'm sure other facilities then neglect the formality of turning the project in. But my issue with the 10 days, I know in the time that it takes us to go to an architect or a design firm, get a fee proposal, get them authorized to start doing drawings and have them complete the drawings and submit an application and do that all in 10 days is a real challenge.
This is not to do the permanent fix, it's to address the temporary fix. As you know, if there is an emergency, the facility is free to abate the emergency. They should be abating the emergency right away and make the building safe for the occupants. This 10 days is for the temporary authorization to get the building into place so it's safe and documenting that was done. That would be followed up by it could be the fix, but it could be followed up by a more elongated project that would take a lot more effort. And we definitely work with the facilities on these situations, but this has not been an issue in the past. It's just that we do a temporary fix and we don't see anything for 3 to 4 months. And then by the time it's fixed, it's either not needed or they remove the stuff. And we do actually have allowances for that already. If they get the fix in place in those 10 days, nothing's required. Because the whole purpose is to get the facility back to the way it was.
And I have no doubt that your team would work with the facility teams on the unique circumstances with each emergency.
Yeah.
And my experience has been nothing but good. I'm simply concerned about the 10 days, the speed at which things have to happen to get even a temporary fix. Oh, from just past week, getting authorization for a no construction project took over 2 weeks just to get our team to authorize it, because we had to pay an architect
Oh, on your side.
money, you know, get to pay the architect money, and to get, you know, which pot of money does that come out of, this fund or that fund?
Yeah, and this bill, like I said, this is the authorization for the temporary work, and it could be as simple as a sketch with some narrative. It's really just to document what was done to correct the emergency situation so that it can be permanently corrected later on. A lot of these we find are, even the temporary fix is the permanent fix. Those aren't so bad. But it's just really to document what was done on a temporary basis to get the facility back up and running. That the way it doesn't fall through the cracks, we can track it in our system.
Can we
So I
change it
see
to
Renee's-
anything? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Renee has his hand up. Renee, please.
Yeah, hey, just to go along with that 10 days, a dumb question. I assume, as one might, that these are business days, not calendar days.
Correct.
And that's clearly indicated somewhere, because I can just imagine the issue happening, late Friday at 5:01, and there's a holiday weekend between, and suddenly 10 days actually becomes 5 working days at most. Is there a clarification about that?
We can add within 10 calendar days.
Okay, thank you.
So Sudhir, did I see that you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was thinking about anything less than 30 days, like 25 days. That's what I had in mind. But whatever committee decides, I'll support it.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the committee? I'd like to at this time ask if the public has a comment, can they please get in the queue? While that's occurring, Richard, can you, so I'm trying to process the 10 days thing. So if there were a fire in a facility or a pipe burst and we needed to do work, when you say the temporary work would be what we're talking about, I'm trying to understand what that would be in that kind of case.
It's, it would be to document what was done to correct the problem. And again, it may be the permanent fix, it may be a temporary, like you said, the with water damage or something like that. It may be, we cap the pipe here or whatever. But as you said, there may be further, using a cooler, chiller, for example, if it goes down, something may be put in place temporarily. That's what that is. We put this chiller in, we got it fixed, we got it up and running. The facility's okay. Now we're going to spend the next 6 months to a year replacing that chiller. That's going to be a separate project. Again, this is just for the emergency portion of that.
Okay. Renee, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did you still have a comment to add?
All right.
Or maybe it was up earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry, live mic again. And just for clarification, was that going to be the modification to business or calendar days? I would hope business days.
Oh, you're correct. I said calendar.
Yeah, it's just, it went off so smoothly. There was no argument. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll mute my mic.
Sudhir, did you have an additional comment?
No, I don't, for some reason, my hands is not going down.
Okay. So then to the public, do we have any public comments?
Yeah, no hands raised and no phone participants.
Thank you. Then I'd like to entertain a motion at this time.
So I move that this item 17 and 18 be approved as amended, and the amendment will be 10 business days.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Do we have any further discussion? So I will say on my part on with this, I have reservations, but I trust Pod will not act in a punitive manner.
Bill,
David,
do we have a
comment?
criteria for that amended change?
Good point, thank you. So the criteria for okay, Irina, we will have criteria number 4 for that. Any further discussion? All right, let's go to a vote.
Bill Zellner,
Approve.
David Hill,
Approve.
Rene Amy,
approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
approve.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
Okay, motion carried, approve as amended.
And that was 17 and 18, right?
Yes.
All right, then let's take I think we could take a 10-minute break and then we'll pick up part 2.
We need to have a global motion for the whole item.
I'll make a motion. We adjourn. So is the right term adjourn or break or something
Break.
else? We'll take a 10-minute break. Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill, I think she needs a motion for all of part 1.
Yeah, for that whole item 5.
Okay, so let's take a motion for all of part 1 to tie it all together.
So moved.
Second.
That's Mike Stone moving and Sudhir second.
I think that was Renee. I was
Oh, I'm
going to
sorry.
approve it. He beat me to it, so that's fine.
That's fine.
Thank you. Do we need to take a vote then, Irina?
Bill Zellner,
Approve?
David Hill,
Approve.
Rene Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
Okay.
Thank you all.
We're done with item 5.
Okay, so then, so the break, we need a motion for that. All motion for a 10-minute break?
No, we don't need that.
We don't, okay. Maybe I misunderstood. All right, then let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:43. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard.
You.
You there? Sorry, it's running late. Okay. Ready to pick up part 2. So I like the way this is going, where we group a few whenever you can. So Richard, let me turn it over to you. Irina, do we have any other business we need to conduct?
That we are starting item 6 on the agenda, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, committee. I'm Richard Tannehill, Deputy Division Chief and Acting Supervisor to Oshpod Building Standards Unit. This proposal is for the 2022 Intervening California Building Code Part 2, Volume 1 for health facilities. The proposed amendments were presented to the Hospital Building Safety Board and Codes and Processes Committee on July 14th, 2022 and October 13th, 2022. A high-level overview of what we'll be looking at today is the removal of designations of the A and B off of Oshpod 2A and 2B. Adding Oshpod 6 for chemical dependency recovery hospitals, and I've been warned that we can't go any higher than 6. Provide clarification on definition of patient rooms to include overnight stays, not just licensing status, adding definitions for treatment rooms, refining language for previous additions for procedures and class 2 imaging rooms, removing or clarifying dimensions for pharmacy spaces and to clarify the finishes in pharmacy compounding areas, provide clarification on when a morgue is required, add behavioral health observation units to emergency departments, remove the requirements for a bathtub in a skilled nursing facility, provide clarification and revision to psychiatric service spaces, and add a requirement for chemical dependency recovery hospitals, which will be the new 1229. Thank you for your time and consideration for approval today. I'd be happy to answer any questions as we go over the items being proposed. So with that, we can jump into, I'm going to look at the groupings of item 1 and item 2. We'll start with item 1 and item 2 if we could, Mr. Chair.
That sounds great. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, item 1, as I mentioned, we had some confusion around the Oshpod 2A and 2B. Once we looked at it, we found out that the 2A and 2B designation is not required. We can have very few requirements for Oshpod 2B that were separate from the 2A, so we can just directly address those specific issues where it applies. And it really doesn't apply to the wood frame structures. So we're removing that requirement, just going back to Oshpod 2 and removing the explanation for Oshpod 2A and 2B. And then we're going to be adding Oshpod 6 for chemical dependency recovery hospitals. This was a new bill that was passed into law this last few months. And so we're adding a new section to allow for chemical dependency recovery hospitals. So we're adding 1-10-6 for the application and enforcing agency, as well as the applicable administrative standards. This is just all common text for each grouping that we have for the different Oshpod facilities. And identifying any of the amendments here. For item 2, we have a definition for interim equipment, just clarifying that interim equipment is not just those that exceed 6 months, but it means equipment that will be in use for the duration of the need of that equipment, not to exceed the duration of construction. It used to have not to exceed 180 days, but interim equipment actually can be used for the duration of construction. So we want to make sure that that was clarified, but also for the need of the use for the equipment. If it's only needed for 6 months on a 3-year project, it should only be there for those 6 months. For movable equipment, we're co-adopting this with DSA for which adding the word for movable equipment means fixed equipment that is directly attached, because movable equipment is actually fixed. It can be detached for cleaning, for maintenance, different uses. But it was adding a lot of confusion where people say, we don't have fixed equipment, we only have movable equipment, but it's actually is fixed equipment that can be detached. That was it. We're just doing 1 and 2, correct? That's what I said.
Yeah, that's
Happy to
do
answer
1 and 2.
questions.
So do we have any questions or clarifications, questions for Richard from the committee? Looks like we've got
If I
Janice.
may,
I'm sorry, Renee, Janice has her hand up.
sure.
Yes, hi, I just wanted to forgive, I know that the OSHPD and HCI have been undergoing a lot of name changes and acronym updates. And in other parts of, in part 1, we went through OSHPD and I remembered seeing a correction from the word health to hospital. Is this going back to health, or are we, if you're able to provide a Cliff Notes crash course version of updating me again, because I'm still trying to keep up, and I just want to make sure that I'm using the right terminology and the right acronyms for the right applications.
You're absolutely correct. OSHPD is no longer the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. It's the Office of Statewide Hospital Planning and Development. We have been asked not to make the changes to the name change in the intervening cycle, because we basically be republishing the entirety of volume 1 and 2, which we don't want to do. So we did, like as Bill asked earlier on part 1, those were specific for invoicing and for contacting us, because we are HCI, but FDD is now OSHPD. So we are allowed to leave the term OSHPD for the OSHPD 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. Does that help? It's very.
I think, if I understand correctly, it's going to stay health for the intervening cycle, but when the new code cycle comes in, it will still remain OSHPD, except that the letter H is going to change from health to hospital.
Correct. That'll be in 2025.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Renee, your hand is up.
Yeah, well, and this is kind of an unneeded comment, I suppose, but as we all gruel through all this fun and games, I do get kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, I have to say, when focus is placed on clarifying, which comes at an interesting time after that immediately prior comment, right? But on clarifying these terms and making sure literally everyone is on the same page. Because there are so many terms of art that can get so confusing to so many. So it's kind of an unneeded comment and a waste of everyone's time. But hey, you know, somebody gets excited by that, this kind of thing, and maybe that's just me. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Thought I saw another hand up. Oh, Sadir. You're on mute. You're on mute, Sadir.
I was trying to lower my hand. No, I have no comment.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I do have a question for you, Richard.
Yes.
Let me find it. I took a note earlier. So on item 1, it's on our page 2 of 30. In the middle of the page or so, 1.10.6.2 has applicable building standards. To put this in context, it's for the new OSHPD 6. The list of parts doesn't include part 1, and I was wondering why that is.
It's above under administrative standards.
Ah, okay. I knew there must be a reason. Okay. Thank you. Other questions by the committee? So if we have public comments, please get in the queue now. And I'll take one last glance at express terms and see. So I don't have any further questions on items 1 or 2. Irina, do we have any public comments at this time?
Don't have any hands raised. We have no phone participants.
Okay, in that case, let's go back to the committee. I'd like to entertain a motion on items 1 or 2, 1 and 2.
I move to approve.
Second,
David Field and Sudhir seconding. Any other comment from the committee? Hearing none, let's go to the vote.
Bill Zelmer,
Approve?
David Phil,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Oh,
Sadir Agrawal,
approve.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
Okay, motion carried.
Thank you.
So I'd like to group items 3, 4, 5, and 6. With this next one.
3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Go right ahead.
Item 3. Basically, we're adding for under this scope for OSHPD 1, we're adding the clarification that the provisions of section 1229 for chemical dependency recovery hospitals on a general acute care license will be provided in a separate unit. This is just common language we do for psych and SNF as well. So just adding that clarification, basically a pointer to 1229. For hand washing stations, there was a redundant door. It says unless hands-free door operation of the door is provided. So we're just removing of the door, unless hand-free door operation is provided. So just clarifying that. Patient rooms. What we're doing here, we're adding under the definition of patient room, it used to be just a licensed bed. And we're adding or rooms occupied by one or more individuals during an overnight stay of over 24 hours in a health facility. And what that allows us to do is apply the accessibility requirements to a room that would not normally be licensed, but should fall under the same requirements for that, such as a LDR room or something like that. So under adding the definition of treatment room, I was surprised that's never been in there before, even though treatment room has. So we're adding the definition of treatment room. And for the medication and medication prep rooms, the terms medicine and medication were used back and forth. So we're just standardizing it to medication. So getting rid of the word medicine in those definitions and adding medication so it's consistent throughout. And that would be for all of 1224.4.4.4. And we get down to toilet rooms. We're actually in the part 5, the plumbing code. We're revising the tables, consolidating table 4-2 to address healthcare facilities. So we're dropping 4-3 as a reference because that really didn't provide a lot of information, but the information that was in there, we're moving to 4-2 in the plumbing code. So just removing that pointer at this time. Under the table for the med gas outlets, we're clarifying the last for the 2022 code, we added the classes of imaging rooms, class 1, 2, and 3, as well as the procedure room. Those were never added to the table. So we're adding for under line 15, general operating room and class 3 imaging room. And under line 39, we're removing interventional because that actually falls under a class 3 room. And then we're adding procedures and class 2 imaging rooms there. Continuing with the corridors, just adding the word term stretchers for bed stretchers or litters. The state fire marshal has been making some revisions and they've changed some of their stuff so that we're trying to align with where they're going with this. So some of these may not seem like, why are you adding the word stretchers? But that's the reason why. And same thing with some of these other ones that we'll be going over right now. such as outpatient departments caring for one or more non-ambulatory patients have a minimum corridor hall width of 6 feet. And adding the requirements for windowsills and special nursing. The way Title 24 is worded is windowsills and intensive care units. It's actually Title 22 states in special nursing care areas may be up to 60 inches. So we're moving intensive care and adding the same terminology, special nursing care area. And also adding the requirement for the sill height does not apply to a newborn nursery in rooms intended for occupancy of less than 24 hours. And again, that's consistent with the language that's already in the code. For interior finishes, we added sterile core the last round. It was requested that we make it real clear and add it to this table. So a sterile core is actually part of the surgical unit and does need to be sterile by its name, as its name states. So we just added that in there to make it real clear. We are getting a lot of ACT tile in these sterile core units. And the whole idea of it being a sterile core, it needs to have the same requirements as the operating arena. Also, the last time when we got the Class 1 imaging room added to the code, which was very nice to do, and we worked on it with CDPH, they looked at this language and thought it was pretty restrictive for Class 1 imaging room and asked us to provide some flexibility there. So a Class 1 imaging room can be services that either A, use a natural orifice entry and do not penetrate natural protective membrane, or are low risk needle-based procedures that do not require sterile field. And that opens up the intent of what those rooms were meant to be used for. And for item 4, this is for nursing service space. We're just changing the word shall to should. This was previously required for common patient, had to have a common patient toilet in the corridor area of each nursing unit. And it used to shall be adjacent to a multi-purpose room and as well as the central bathing facility. So that would be adding, could be adding additional toilet. So we're putting the word should be. What's important here is that there is a patient toilet that's outside of the patient rooms that's available for use of a patient that's roaming the corridor or using one of those other facilities. And under item 5 for the control station, this is for an operating suite where you have a control station that controls access. A lot of the staff locker rooms do not come through the control station, so they can, and they're secure, so they can change their clothes, get donned for surgery, and come through, leave the dressing room and straight into the operating suite without exiting the space and going through the control station. That was adding a lot of confusion, so we're adding that. And item 6 is for CT scanners, just clarifying that the space required around the CT scanner is really the requirement for access is on the sides and at the foot of the table, but they still need to maintain service clearances. It used to be 4 feet completely around the machine. And now it's just whatever the service requirement is for the clearance at the back of the CT scanner, that would what would be required for that piece of equipment.
And that's as far as we're going through
Yes.
item 6.
Yeah.
So it's 3, 4, 5, and 6, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. So I want to open it up to the committee at this time. Do we have any questions of Richard from the committee?
Okay. On these tables, this is there. On these tables, the footnote will come with it, right? like on table 1224, 461, 4611, or 411, 411, 4A. On these tables, there is a footnote which is referenced at the top, like 1 and 2 or 1 and 6.
Correct. Those
That
aren't,
will come later. Yeah, they will
all
come
we're
later.
doing is adding the term sterile core to the operating.
Right.
system. So all the footnotes would be, we're just showing the portion of the table that's actually changing.
Oh, okay, okay. Now on 1224.7.3, that is item 4. So on that one, at one place, they are talking about 5 feet corridor, and the other place, they are talking about 6 feet. And one other place, I saw 3 feet. Can we make it like a consistent, like one, like a 5 feet or something like that? Or is there a reason they have different varying corridors?
Yeah, actually, we're doing this to align with the state fire marshal requirements. It's not a change that we're initiating, but the operating, with the outpatient department caring for, they're non-ambulatory, they're going to 6 feet instead of the 5. Normally it's 5 feet, so they are requiring the additional foot for non-ambulatory transportation.
Reason I was saying is it makes it simpler if everything is 6 feet.
I agree with you, but with 5 feet is very, actually,
Right.
I had surgery recently and they were hitting the walls left and right.
Oh, okay.
In a 5 foot corridor, so.
I go for MRI a lot, so I know all these details.
Yeah, but we're actually not making this change. We're following suit with state fire marshal changes that they're going to be proposing later.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Other comments from committee members? So Richard, I have a comment. Actually, the same paragraph that Sudhir was bringing up. So let me get my everything together here. So for the record, this is item 3. And page, looks like page 5, page 4, no, page 5 of 30, at the bottom of the page, under section 1224.4.7.3, outpatient services, and this is discussing the corridor width. So the concern I have is the term non-ambulatory outpatients, and looking up what exactly is non-ambulatory. The outpatient departments caring for one or more non-ambulatory outpatients shall have a minimum corridor width of 6 feet. I have no problem with the 6 foot requirement. I think it makes sense. My concern is about defining non-ambulatory. So I looked in chapter 2, it is defined. The definition is pretty broad. It includes, and I'll just read from it briefly if I might. The definition in chapter 2 of the building code for non-ambulatory persons, persons unable to leave a building unassisted under emergency conditions. It includes, but is not limited to, persons who depend on mechanical aids such as crutches, walkers, and wheelchairs, and any person who is unable to physically and mentally respond to a sensory signal approved by the state fire marshal, blah, 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 blah. So I don't want to spin out into Never Never Land, but the defining which outpatient is dealing with non-ambulatory patients and which ones aren't is the question I have. How do we do that?
That's a great question because that definition is so broad. It covers everything. And I don't know if they're addressing that separately. But how we look at this is people that are in gurneys that are being transported.
That certainly makes sense. As I was prepping for this meeting, I was trying to work through my head, what kind of outpatient department would that involve? And it's not really clear to me, so.
Yeah, it can be anything from dialysis to even some surgeries, things like that can fall under that. It's just a temporary, they're not inpatient confined to a bed. They're just temporarily on that bed or a stretcher to get them to point A to point B. And the idea is, like I said, is because they are transporting them, that they want the corridors to be wide. These requirements are actually already in other sections of the code.
Chapter 10.
And what State Farm Marshal is doing is they're going through, they're actually going to be proposing to eliminate I-2.1. So you might see the connection here.
Sure,
The I-2.1 is basically an outpatient service where you have 5 or more people incapable of self-preservation. So they're removing I-2.1. So these changes are to align with model code to meet the same requirements. The requirements are already identified. They just don't need, and here they're just being clarified because they are removing that other language. And so they don't want it to fall through the cracks and not be picked up.
Okay, so I want to follow up. So this is being driven by State Fire Marshal's office?
It's not their
request?
revision, but it's a result of the revisions that they're proposing. And we've been working on removing I-2.1 for some time, and you can imagine it's pretty complicated to pull that. But from my understanding, ICC is addressing that same condition as of the 2022, I believe. And Janice might be able to correct me if it's 2019 or not. I can't remember which, but they did include the same requirements, but they did it in a way that's not the same as we did. So we have to make some adjustments elsewhere. For us, this is the only place you'll be seeing that today.
Okay, well, I've aired my concern.
No, I appreciate it. And it'll be something we look at, but that's how it came down to. I mean, that's probably why I have a little bit more difficulty explaining it, because we're responding to someone else's revision.
All right, well, David.
I had a question regarding item 6, and just this is more of a grammatical issue. So help me understand. I feel like there's an article missing in the edit, and I don't know if we would, under criteria 6, we just recommend adding something, but if you take out the additions and subtraction, it reads, if provided CT scan spaces shall accommodate the equipment with a minimum of 3 feet on sides and foot of the equipment. So I just feel like there's a word missing there, unless I'm incorrect. If I'm incorrect, then that's fine.
That would be helpful on the sides and foot of the equipment.
Okay.
We can add that. Sometimes when you're writing code, you're too.
Oh, I totally, yeah, I totally get. Sometimes when you're writing anything, that happens. So.
All right, any further comments from the committee?
Bill, I got one more comment on item 4, 1224-14-216. It talks about the corridor for the patient toilet area. I think other places I saw without having to go to the corridor.
Which section are you on? I apologize.
1224 on item 4, 1224-14-216. Patient toilet room. So other places I have seen without having to go to the corridor.
Yeah, this actually, it's required to have a common patient toilet in the corridor in each unit. That's not a new requirement. What was confusing was we have to connect it. It had to be adjacent to either a multi-purpose room or the central bathing facility. In the central bathing facility, actually, the requirements for those have pretty much gone away, but there's still an option. This is the roll-in type shower that was required. So this is just stating that you have the option of where that patient toilet goes, but the common patient toilet is in the corridor. It's not, it's for if a patient is out of the room, walking around or going to a training session in one of the multi-purpose rooms, they have to have somewhere to go to the restroom without going back to the room.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? If there's anybody in the public that has a comment, please get in the queue at this time. Help me out with the numbering. We're talking about items 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think
Okay.
3,
Yes.
4, 5, and 6.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public?
There are no hands raised and no phone participants.
Thank you. Then I would like to go back to the committee and request a motion.
Motion to approve items 3, 4, 5, and 6 as submitted. Mike Stone.
Mike, I thought there was a comment by somebody about changing the word and to or on item 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have missed that. I'm okay with the, do I need to withdraw my motion or just amend it?
Redo it. It has not been passed. So yeah, you can change it. You can amend it.
Restate
Yeah, let's,
your motion.
yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Sure. So it'll be approve as amended. Sudhir, can you help us? Which item was
That
it?
was item 6, 12, 24, 18, 3, 1.
And it would be adding the word
Or.
and.
The,
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah,
On the sides and foot of the equipment. Okay,
And,
Sudhir, did you second it?
yes, I'll send it.
And the 9 point criteria.
I mentioned 6 because it was ambiguous.
Thank you, David. All right, any further comments from the committee? Hearing none. Let's go to a vote.
Bill Zellner,
I approve.
David Phil,
Approve.
Rene Amy,
Approve.
Zadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
motion carried.
All right, Richard, back to you.
all right. With your permission, I'd like to do 7 through 11.
Sounds good.
7 may look long, but I'll go through it. This is kind of 2 of the same issues repeated over and over. We added pharmacies in 2019, or sorry, in the beginning of the 2022 code, we added the requirements for pharmacies. What we found was that the space requirements were pretty restrictive, actually too big. So what we did was we just removed all references to the sizes of these rooms, because they are actually based on the actual use of the room, the types of equipment going in, as well as the hoods that they're using. The other thing that we did is for under finishes, we added work surfaces for the type of surfaces that are being free from cracks and crevices. We removed the word the ceiling for the ceiling tiles. They actually prefer that they not be gasketed. So we're removing the term scrubbable and gasketed panels. The gaskets actually provide a gap that you can get debris into and germs can grow in. So they preferred that not be gasketed. And then we added the language, if ceilings consist of inlaid panels, the panels must be caulked around each panel to seal them to the support frame. So that takes, it used to be gasketed and caulked, now it's just the caulking is required. So that aligns with the USB language and the CDPH language for that. And you'll see that repeated 3 or 4 times here, as well as the removal of the sizes of the rooms. Okay, for item 8, we just changed the word and to or. Again, it was just adding confusion. A central supply and sterilizing area shall be provided. Rooms or distinct spaces shall accommodate. You used to say rooms and, so is assuming that you had to have both. So again, just to clarify language. Under morgue, under item 9, the morgue, we had an exempt if the facility had more than 50 beds, but the actual requirement is that between 50 and 100 beds, they are allowed to use external sources of external facilities that are contracted out. But once they get over 100 or more beds, they have to have the morgue. That is not an option beyond that. And you'll see the same thing in the site code changes, but we're just aligning with Title 22 on that. Again, with the morgue, we have a lot of people wanting to put scrub sinks in the morgue, and it's stated hand washing station. And to most of us, it's obvious, yeah, you can put a scrub sink in there, but it was coming up as an issue over and over. So we're just clarifying that a hand washing station or a scrub sink can be provided in the morgue. For item 10, for NICU, the requirement for gowning, this is for parents gowning, had never gone away, but it actually fell out of the code back in 2016. And we just noticed it. So we're adding, provide a hand washing station and gowning back by the control station. So just reverting back to the old language. And for item 11, this is for LDR and LDRPs. It was a requirement that there be a space in the room that's distinct from the mother's area that provided infant stabilization. Working with CDPH, we found that there's an option for a stabilization room outside. And if they provide that stabilization room, they don't need to provide the additional room within the patient room itself to do that. So it's either or. So we're just revising the language to state that if an infant resuscitation room is not provided elsewhere, service space shall be provided in the room per section, et cetera. And in addition to the minimum service requirements for the mother. So it's the same language. We're saying if there is a resuscitation room provided elsewhere in the unit, this extra space wouldn't be required. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Comments from the committee? So that does cover a lot of ground. I appreciate, Richard, the way you went over the Chapter 19 pharmacy. It is repetitive.
Thank you.
So not seeing any hands. If anybody from the public has a comment, please get in the queue at this time. So I'm scrolling through this myself. So I don't have any comments.
Bill, I have one comment if I may go
Yes,
back.
please.
On, let's see what item is it? Item 7. It is on page 11. At the bottom, 12/24/19/3331. The anteroom shall be of adequate size. Can we define the word? Well, it's not changed, so it was there before. Never
Yeah,
mind.
that was actually the language that we should, because again, it's going to be based on the type of equipment going into the anteroom. The new requirement under USP is the anteroom. The sink can be on either side of the line of demarcation. So that's what they're talking about, the demarcated area. So we just wanted to make it more flexible for the facilities to meet their protocol.
So I saw the word adequate and I was saying it's not marked, but it could have been defined.
That's a bad word to use in code.
Right. No comment further.
Okay, any other comments from the committee? Okay. And of course, if somebody ever through the course of all of this remembers something at the last moment, feel free to jump in there. At this time, I'd like to go to the phones. Do we have any comments from the public?
No hands raised and no phone participants.
Thank you. Then I'd like to entertain a motion at this time.
I move to approve.
Thank you, David. Could for the record keeping, which item numbers are you motioning? I know we are going up through 11.
We are going, I move to approve items 7 through 11.
7 through 11. Thank you.
I second it.
Any comments from the committee?
So Bill, we cannot do anything about the adequate size, the one which I referenced earlier. Okay,
We cannot.
thank you. Thank you.
No doubt Richard is hearing you. All right. If there's no comments from the committee, let's go to the vote.
Bill Zelmer,
I approve.
David Bill,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
We approved and motion carried.
Okay. So Richard, you could indulge me. I want to do something we probably shouldn't do much of. I want to go back for clarity. I don't want to undo any of our votes or anything, but I want to bring up an issue and ask for clarity on something. Before I do, we're about to go to item 12, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to go back to item 3 for just a moment. As I was trying to juggle what I'm seeing on the screen, I blew past one item I wanted to be clear about. So in the definition of patient room, so we've approved this and it's done. You had mentioned that the overnight stay of 24 hours thing, we end up with rooms such as an LDR and probably observation rooms. And this clarification will allow us to classify those rooms in the patient room category.
Correct.
And so then the accessibility scoping will match that, whatever the
Correct,
patient room, 10%. Just thinking this through, the scoping goes 10%, 50%, 100% for general mid-surge, for skilled nursing, and for rehab.
Correct.
I'm assuming this all will fall then under 10% scoping.
Yes, it really won't affect rehab because rehab very specific rehab rooms or skilled nursing facilities. Where we found out is needed, like I said, the LDR has a different requirement from an LDRP because they're licensed, but they're still used. And it won't affect any of the outpatient rooms. They still have 100% as well. You know, exam rooms, treatment rooms will still be 100%.
Right.
It's just that we had a different requirement for an LDR over an LDRP, and then like you said, observation rooms, they should meet the same requirement as a med-surg unit.
So there is an implication there. I'm an accessibility guy, so that one caught my ear. That will change that issue. Okay, so I just wanted clarity on that, unless there's any other comments on that item, which is.
I'm
kind of-
also on accessibility. Bill.
Ah, okay.
That's the second and third. Maybe we can
Right
bring
on.
it up there.
All right, back to item 12.
Okay, if you like, I can do 12 through 16.
Okay, please do.
Item 12 is for emergency service space. We're adding behavioral health observation area under 12-24-33.2.7.1. And basically we copied what was used for the observation area for a patient, copied it down and right-sized it for psychiatric or behavioral health type patients, thus requiring only 40 square feet of space and visual control of the area. So all the requirements are basically the same other than the space. And this is kind of like a holding area in an ED where they're either being observed for release or waiting for transportation. What we were seeing is a lot of projects coming in. They literally called them dormitories, where they had rows of seats like a theater, and you have behavioral health patients sitting right next to each other. And so this will provide a necessary area of separation for that. In addition to that, under the emergency staff lounge, we just clarified that the way the language was written before it said include staff toilet change areas with lockers, showers, toilets. And we found people putting lockers in the toilet rooms, and which are inaccessible to anybody when the restroom is being used. So we're just adding it, the 16 for the staff clothing changing areas, that appropriate areas shall be provided for male and female working within the emergency service space. The area shall contain lockers, showers, toilets, and hand washing stations. So hopefully I'll remove some of that confusion. Then we had some renumbering, and then we get to the fast track area. Fast track, we're just, again, there was no allowance for an open bay in the fast track. So we're just adding the requirements for open bays where they have multiple beds, like a PACU or something. So meeting the same requirements in an open bay area, stating what the space requirement for that is, which is 80 square feet, which is alignment with the other types of rooms, as well as requiring an exam, table light, hand washing stations in each room, or one for every 4 patients. So again, that's really aligned with the previous types of language for open bay situations. For item 13, this is kind of more housekeeping stuff for nuclear med rooms. We have a PET scanner and a CT scanner, a SPECT scanner. What we've been finding out, the newer equipment doesn't have the same requirements for radiation protection that had previously been required. So we're going to base it on the physicist report. So if a control room is required on the physicist report, it shall be provided with full direct view of the patient. That's both for the PET scanner and the SPECT scanner. And except the reason for that is that we're getting a lot of requests to put the tech right in the room with the patient during the procedure. And the physicist reports, we have been requiring it. We just want it real clear that's going to be required. Because the physicists report are checking the equipment and stating that it's okay, but not all equipment is there yet. The other item here is part that's underlined under the SPECT was actually dropped out of the code last cycle by mistake. So we're just putting it back in. It was left out of our presentation and they removed it. So is something we're correcting, but the same language is being back in for multi-bay scanner rooms. Should have a minimum of 4 feet clear and should be provided with each scanner. It has to have a mobile screen between it. I mean, it's a simple requirement. It just fell out of the code. For item 14, for physical therapy spaces, it's a requirement. There's 300 square feet for physical therapy. And we also have allowances for individual patient care stations. What we found were people were putting the 60-foot requirement for the individual patient care stations in the 300 feet. And so now they're ending up with almost nothing for their exercise spaces. So we're clarifying that in addition, the 300 feet is required in addition to providing the therapy stations. So the therapy stations have to be outside of that 300 square feet. And item 15 for skilled nursing units. This was a request by the skilled nursing facility industry, if you will, that there was always a requirement that they have one bathtub per floor. They found that the bathtubs are the single most dangerous piece of equipment that they have for falling hazards. And they asked that requirement be removed. And we checked with Title 22, there is no requirement elsewhere to require a bathtub in a skilled nursing facility. They still have the option to do so, but we're removing the requirement to provide it. And also under the medical model, we're adding the same requirement for the operating sills that are similar to any other type of patient room, so that a patient can evacuate through a window if necessary. And the same requirement if they're operable, they may have to be keys, or if they're locked, they have to have keys accessible or tools accessible to open those windows if they're operable. And then item 16 is just for dental exam rooms. Just clarifying that the space for dental x-ray rooms don't have to meet the same requirements as an imaging room would, which was it could have been read that way in the past. And that's it under the word shall, and it said also comply with, so let me read that so it's clear. If provided the space for dental panographic x-ray systems and printers shall comply with the shielding requirements stated. So they do have to comply, but that may mean less. When it says also had to comply, was actually providing additional layer of protection. It was confusing a lot of people and thought it was excessive. And that was never really the intent. It was just the way that word was being looked at. And then lastly, here, the housekeeping room has a invalid pointer that was never updated when it was changed last time. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm scanning and looking at my version of the code while I listen. We started with 12, so this is 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so to the committee, do we have comments or questions for Richard?
Just a general comment, Chair, Mr. Chair. Some places they are referring to 3 feet, some places they are referring to 4 feet in different rooms or different areas. Is there a reason which I can get some understanding?
Yes, there actually is. Anything dealing with a CT is 4 feet.
Okay.
Just as access to the patient, it's not just access to the table, because they may have to do procedures in there if they're under emergency conditions. So that there is a larger requirement at 4 feet for the CT, PET CT, and SPECT CT.
And 3 feet is for the patient.
3 feet is usually access to the table. 4
Okay.
feet is access
Okay.
to the patient, if you will,
Yeah.
for procedure type stuff. If there's an emergency or something, they want to make sure there's enough room to bring someone in on both sides of the table to help them.
Like on item 12, 1224 33 271. I see 3 feet and also the 4 feet is within the same change on the behavioral health observation area.
Right, and 3 feet, again, it's for access.
Yeah.
Most places you're going to see 3 feet. It's really just the CT. And the reason that the PET and the SPECT are in there because they usually have a CT attached.
Okay. Thanks for clarification.
Mhm.
Other comments from the committee? So I had a clarification or two. If anybody from the public has a comment, please get in the queue at this time. Richard, I had a question. I've got to scroll down and find. So in the fast track area, so this, I want to get my bookkeeping right here. This is item 12. And under the emergency on the 1224.33 section, under fast track, it's not a question regarding what you've written, but it's an, I'm asking to understand this better. So the item 1 says space requirements, each fast track station shall have a minimum 100 square feet of clear floor area. And then the part that you've added. So I'm trying to understand that the term station is not common typically where I'm seeing the terms room or bay. So in this context, how are we to understand the term station?
I believe patient station is defined under definitions. I have to look at that real quick.
Oh, I did not know that. So, and as it's the changes that you have proposed. The term station is used also on item 2. Each station shall include a work documentation counter and an examination table light. So I'm trying to understand, is a station more or less what I've understood bays to be? Is it somehow different?
It's actually a patient care station is a designated space for specific patient care function. The term does not imply any structural requirements, etc. But it can have, it's anywhere that they're taking care of, where they're basically where there's a bed. It can be in a bay, it can be in a room, it can be in a cubicle. It's defined under patient care locations under 1224.3.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
We're actually trying to go to that more than we have.
The term station.
Yeah, because it gets confusing with room. If you say a patient room versus, because you have to have a room, so that station basically says anywhere they're treating a patient. It can be a bay, a cubicle, or a room.
Understood. So I don't have any further comments. Back to the committee. Does anybody else have comments or questions for Rich?
Bill, I have one more comment. Item 14 on the therapy station, page 18 at the top. I've seen a lot of common space, like multiple therapists are there. It's not a separate area by itself, but like a common space. Can that space be shared?
Yes. Yeah, it says they basically says a therapy station has 60 square feet. It doesn't say a room. So yes, it can be in that space. We just don't want it to encroach into 300 square feet required for exercise and the equipment. So they can have a bigger room with individual patient care stations along the side, or if they can do private cubicles or private rooms as well. There's different options. So we're not restricting that now.
So that space gets cut down in that sense overall.
Well, except we don't want them to encroach into the 300 foot that's required for the exercise space. Okay. And that's what we were seeing. They said, well, I have 300 feet for my rehab, but I'm putting all these patient care stations. Now you have 60 feet left, which isn't very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other further comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to go to the public. Do we have any public in the queue?
No hands raised and no comments.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to ask our committee for a motion. 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16.
So
5
moved,
items.
so moved to approve as submitted, item 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16? No, yes, 16, 16, yes.
Do we have a second? I'll second.
Second,
Oh. Beat you. Bill Zomer seconding. Comments from the committee? Hearing none, let's go to a vote.
Bill Zomer,
I approve.
David Phil,
approve.
Renee Amy, Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
motion carried.
All right, Richard, back to you.
Okay, we only have 2 more items left. Number 18 is really big, so I just would like to cover 17 alone, and then we'll go to 18 independently. So item 17 is for psychiatric facilities. The lead into this, the application, we're just aligning the same language that we had in 1224, which basically states that if you're a medical unit, you need to follow the 1224 requirements, and if you're basically what I call ambulatory psychiatric unit, you can follow the requirements of 1228. And it just clarifies that the patient risk assessment is required as part of the functional program. Okay. We're adding the definition for tamper resistant. This came up a lot. We're correcting the pointer for seclusion room. And one of the biggest AMCs we get on psych facilities is providing translucent film on the windows up to 60 inches. So we're just adding that to the code because it's always approved. That's a privacy concern. And there was some confusion over the requirement of 8% of the floor area for an activity space and a dining space had to be provided with glazing. And everyone's, is that exterior glazing or is that for observation? And it's actually for observation. So we're saying shall be provided for observation from the nursing station. They need to see in that room to make sure nothing is going on that shouldn't be. Under continuing with the physical therapy space for psychiatric, the where provided was removed last time. This is not a required service. And there was some confusion with the Department of Public Health where they said physical rehab space is required. So they removed where provided or we removed where provided. And once we looked into it afterwards and got into reviewing plans, we realized their activity space, even though it's called the same, is actually used for like group settings and stuff, not for physical therapy. So we're basically making that back to an option. Whereas the way it was reworded was it was required and it's not. Under the nursing requirements for patient rooms, the 110 square feet, for those that were around, we changed the space requirement last time from 100 to 110 because Title 22 doesn't allow any rooms under 110 square feet. In this case, for the psychiatric facilities, we put inclusive of the beds so that these rooms, they don't have the same equipment requirements of the med-surg unit, so they can be smaller. And so we just put inclusive of bed, so that includes the 110 square feet. So it brings it down to about 90 feet clear around the bed. Examination and treatment rooms has always been there, but we only had a pointer to the exam rooms. So now that we're adding a definition for treatment rooms, we're pointing to that. And then, as I mentioned before, the morgue and a psych facility, it used to be if we used to interpret it as over 50 beds, you can get a contract out. But again, between 50 and 199, they can contract out. But if it's 200 or more, they do have to have a morgue within the facility. So just clarifying that language aligned with Title 22. And that's it for item 17.
Thank you, Richard. So do we have comments or questions from Richard, for Richard?
Okay, I have some comments. The on item 17, of course, 1228.3, the definition. Normally, we put the definition up front section like part 1, part 2. Is there a reason we are putting the temper resistance definition here? That's the first.
We did it the same as like the Sally port, as the example shows, is it's specific to a psychiatric unit.
Okay, and the second comment is at other places on the merge room, it was 100 or under, or 19 up to 99. And here on this is again 1228.24.1. And instead of 50 to 199, other places I thought up to 99, and then once you got 100, then you got a different code.
Correct.
So is there a region here it is 150 to 199?
Correct. In a acute care hospital, it's up to 100. In a psychiatric facility, they don't anticipate as many deaths. They've moved it to 199.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhir. Any other comments from the committee? If we have comments from the public, please get in the queue at this time. So Richard, I had a question at the beginning of this item 17, under application, the whole paragraph of new language there. The last sentence, if a facility or unit provides acute medical care, the unit shall be located in a building that is compliant with California Administrative Code Chapter 6 for OSHPD 1.
I think that should be a 7.
Okay.
That wasn't your comment.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to process is these are defined as OSHPD 5 acute psych hospitals, but they will have to comply with OSHPD 1 requirements if they are
They're medical
care.
If
So I'm
they're-
trying to process, is it both at the same time?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
How do you refer to, how will we classify it? Is it then an OSHPD 1 or it's an OSHPD 5 that has to comply with OSHPD 1?
OSHPD 1. OSHPD 1224 has their own requirements for a psychiatric facility. That is a medical unit. So if someone's psychiatric and they have a medical condition, that's the requirements for that. And that's what this is saying. So if they're an ambulatory type normal, I won't call it normal, psychiatric unit that we're more familiar with, then it would fall under 1228. When 1228 was written, they really didn't distinguish between the two. And but they left it in 1224 as a distinct part. And it, through conversations with CDPH, we realized that we need to clarify that the 1228 is for your standalone psychiatric hospital. And then you have your 1224, that's for your medical unit, psychiatric medical unit within a hospital. So that's how we're distinguishing it. Certain medical procedures can be done in a OSHPD 5, but they're limited.
So then this is more of a global question. It's not about your wording, it's understanding. So if you have a psych unit, the minute that you say that you want to do some medical care beyond the minimum that's allowed, then it really needs to be an OSHPD 1. Is that
Correct.
what I'm, okay.
Yeah, that's the thing is if you have to do, say, surgery in a psych unit, now you have a general acute care hospital. You're an OSHPD 1 now.
Okay.
Or more likely, they're going to transfer that patient to the acute care hospital. But they might hold them in the distinct part psych unit which would still be Oshpod 1.
Okay, that helps me
It was very
understand that better.
confusing. And we actually discuss it with CDPH all the time with their legal, because believe it or not, Title 22 doesn't have a distinct part psych unit.
Understood. That's all that I have. Any other comments from our committee? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the phones. Or do we have any comments from the public?
Yeah, no hands raised and no phone participants.
Okay, then I'd like to go back to the committee. Could we get a motion for item 17?
Recommend to approve as submitted.
And a second?
May I say something, Mr. Chair?
Sure,
Of
sure, go
course.
ahead.
Under 1228.2, we do have a typo. It should be chapter 7, not
Chapter
chapter.
7. Yeah, so yes,
Good
accept
point.
that. Well, let's change it, approved as amended. With the
And-
modification on 1228.2 from chapter 6 to chapter 7.
And then we'll need to cite one of the
Yeah,
9 criteria.
I'll look into it.
And I'll second it. The criteria,
And was there
Six.
9?
6,
criteria 6,
4 and 6.
4 and 6. All right, do we have any comments from the committee?
Bill, this is David. I have a
Yes.
comment. I'm
Yes.
wondering if there is a typo on, and I'm sorry if you guys I've missed it. I've been looking around. So this is redundant. I apologize. Under item 17, I think the reference is wrong. Under the psychiatric nursing service space, section 1228.14.25. I think the changed code should be 1228.4.4.1.2. I think we're missing a 4 there.
So I got lost. Could you
What?
do that?
I know. That's
Yes.
I've been trying to. So it's
Yeah.
on page 21, and
Okay.
it is the section 1228 .14.2 service areas. I think the change is missing a 4 in its reference. Because if you take the reference that's there, it takes you to egress locations. But if you add a 4 there, it takes you to examination rooms. But I could be wrong, but
Are you, so the 1228, the reference, the pointer is what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the pointer.
I think you're correct. Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well done. So I'd like to have us roll that into the motion if we could. It's an approve as amended.
I'll change it, yeah. So approved as amended with the criteria 4 and 6, and the corrections being 1228.2, changing from chapter 6 to 7, and 1228.14.2 to go into 1228.14.2.1 instead of 5. Is that correct, Renee?
Okay, let's double check that.
That's on page 21 at the bottom. I mean, just a, yeah.
So to be clear, the pointer, the language where it says and 1228.4.1.2, that's what we're talking about changing.
No, 14 point.
Type of. Okay, now
Help me
okay.
out, please.
help me get that right.
So where it says refer to section 1228.4.4.1.1 and 1228.4, add another 4.1.2.
Yes.
Okay, so that is,
Yes, please.
the
Yes.
new language is got the typo in it.
Yes.
The pointer is missing one, yes.
Okay. All right, is anybody not clear on that? Need further clarification?
We need to amend the second. Somebody has to amend the second. Second has to approve this motion.
So, in all of the discussion, I lost track. Who was I the second or was that somebody else?
And that was you.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. All right, any other comments from the committee? All right, hearing none, let's go to a vote.
Bill Zelmer,
I approve.
David Phil,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Zadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
motion carries. Thank you.
So Richard, so we've got this last one. Before we pick that up, we're at 12 o'clock. My intention is to go ahead and power through and finish this last item. Unless there's an objection to that, we're going to keep working through. So first that, is anybody not okay with that? All right.
Sounds good to me.
Second thing, so I need a full disclosure. I'm going to, what's the right term? I'm not going to vote on this next item. I'm going to recuse myself. I was involved, this went through some legislation through the state legislature. The bill was then signed by the governor. I was involved in part of that activity and working up some of the language. So I'll be part of the conversation as we discuss all of this. But when it comes to the vote, I'm going to recuse myself. Richard, go ahead and take it away.
So this is very long item, even though it's the last single item, it's like 5, 6 pages. How would you like to address it? Do you want me to run through it, or do you want to just ask questions or give a high level overview?
Let's run through it.
Yeah,
Okay.
just do a high level overview.
Yeah.
And then kind of like you've been, hit the high points as we go through. I don't know that you have to go through a lot of detail on
Okay.
6 pages.
That's fine, thank you. So for item 8 is, as Bill mentioned, there was a law that was, or a bill passed into law that required us to provide divine requirements for chemical dependency recovery hospitals. So what we're doing is we're providing, we took the requirements for a psychiatric unit and kind of pared it down to meet the requirements of a chemical dependency unit because they're, and hospital. So this will apply to a distinct part chemical dependency unit. It'll apply to a chemical dependency recovery hospital, as well as a allowance for the, I could just call them CDRHs, the CDRH to be in a OSHPD 1R building, basically a building that was removed from acute care services. Chemical dependency is not an acute care service. So the first thing we're starting with is the scope, which basically is very similar to the provisions for a psychiatric or skilled nursing definition. And then we go into defining the distinct portion of that. Basically, this can be in an acute care hospital or acute psychiatric hospital and classified as a chemical dependency recovery unit. Okay. We do require a functional program because of the severity or lesser severity of the patients. It just needs to be identified what type of protections are going to be put in place, if any. We identify the basic services. Excuse me. It's basically medical, nursing, rehab, and pharmaceutical, dietary, and support. And then we actually identify provide a definition of what a chemical dependency recovery hospital is. And then we define what a hospital is. Because a CDRH on its own is not technically a licensed hospital, it's a licensed service. Okay, then we just get into the requirements such as examination and treatment rooms. You'll see a lot of pointers back to 1224 for these requirements because they're really identical. Just checking the pointers for the treatment room here. We actually got this one right. Also have outpatient waiting rooms because a lot of these services that will be provided will be outpatient. Again, just for your information, these will not have the security or the anti-ligature type requirements unless the functional program states it's required. And we don't see that very often in chemical dependency units because most of them are voluntary. We have corridor widths here, which is 5 feet. Again, if it is part of a general acute care hospital, it'll be at 8 feet. We point back to doors and windows, back to the 1224 requirements, the ceiling heights, all that information. In addition to the basic service, we have patient counseling. And here again, we just refer back to 1229.14.7, which is like a consult room. And then there's requirements for group therapy, physical conditioning shall be provided if it's for like an organized program of physical activities. Space for the family therapy shall be included. And these physical conditioning family therapy are services if provided. Just to make that clear, same with outpatient services. The activity areas that are required, there's going to be an indoor activity room. At least 2 separate activity rooms shall be required, one for group recreation and one for quiet area. Has the space requirements of 25 feet per bed with at least 120 square feet of clear floor area for each of the 2 spaces. And the outdoor activity area is just a space outdoors for activity. There's no requirements other than and it's actually even an option if provided. The residential areas or the room areas points back to actually residential requirements of 1202, 1203, and so forth, as these are not considered acute care beds, but a distinct part unit as part of a general acute care hospital shall comply with the requirements of 1224.14 for those patient rooms, as well if it's distinct part of a psych would be 1224.14 for a psych patient room. A maximum of 2 patients per room, space requirements of 100 square feet per bed, and that's so they can be used in a older facility or OSHWAD 1R building. As I noted, that CDPH or Title 22 requires 110 square feet for each hospital room. These are not considered hospital rooms unless they're a distinct part. Each patient room shall have access to a toilet room without having to enter a corridor. And 1 toilet room shall serve no more than 2 patient bedrooms or no more than 4 patients. Patient storage shall be provided in a separate room. This is very similar to the psychiatric requirements, just for personal belongings. And then the service areas can be shared if they're distinct part, can be shared with the hospital or the psych hospital it belongs to, but they also need administrative centers or nurse stations and an office for staff. In the patient care support areas, you need consult rooms, conference rooms, and space for group therapy. The pharmaceutical requirements shall be comply with the sections of 1224.19, but may have shared services for chemical dependency units that are provided as distinct part of a CAC or a psych unit can be shared with the pharmaceutical services. Same with the dietary, it's required, but it can be shared with the host hospital if there's a distinct part. Otherwise, they need to provide dietetic service space and dining area. Storage requirements are meet the same as a psychiatric unit, the lesser requirement of 10 square feet per bed. Like I mentioned, you have specialized storage for linen supply. Again, these all the storage requirements align with those of a psych unit, which are a lot less than those required in the hospital. Employee lockers, that's all that's required, are lockers, not a complete changing room. You have requirement for housekeeping room and the laundry, similar as 1224, so they can contract out service for laundry. And for adolescent space, shall be separate from the adult spaces. And again, this is very similar to the psychiatric requirements for separation of adolescents and adults. And they have the same distinguishing requirements for their space requirements. In this case, adolescents can go into a corridor to use a restroom. I believe they have to. And they have to have their own activity area. Same requirement for outdoor area, just has to be provided and has to be separate from adult spaces. And they still have their own storage areas for equipment, extra beds, and parents. And then they have if they're going to be staying for over 30 days, they should have a classroom or for education purposes. If personnel, clients, patients will be there for more than 30 days. And any other additional services would need to be approved by CDP, and that would be it.
Thank you, Richard. I know there's a lot of material there. So I wanted to add on to this a little perspective. I know we at Sutter Health, we encountered this issue, and you all are code people. I'm sure you could appreciate this story. So we went to go do one, a CDRH, which exists in the law, a chemical dependency recovery hospital. So we go to the code book. What does it have to be? What are the requirements? And there is none. There is currently nothing in the code that says, here's what you do. And it doesn't really fit as a residential, a 24-hour stay. And these are non-medical, so it doesn't really fit in medical care. So we really went around and we consulted with OSHPD. It happened to be in a former OSHPD 1 facility, an OSHPD 1R. But in a broader context, those requirements, there are no standards. So OSHPD has graciously filled this gap that was discovered that, golly, nobody has requirements for this sort of thing. So with that, I'll let it go. I do have one question, if you don't mind, Richard. Going back through the 6 pages, I had written down one question I had.
That's pretty good coming from you.
Oh dear. So up front in the definitions, under basic services, means those essential services required by law for licensure as an acute psychiatric hospital. Is that right? I was wondering, why doesn't it say in a general acute care hospital or psychiatric hospital? I was trying to process this. Is that the right language to use?
No, I think you're correct. I think that should be licensure as a chemical dependency. We probably took the language from the psych code and probably got left behind.
Okay.
So we will, I would propose to change that to chemical dependency recovery.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that answers my question. And that's all I've got. Other questions? It looks like Renee has a question. Renee.
Yes, thank you. Just a point of information on the whole sausage making process here, which we're involved in and part of. Bill, you mentioned the idea that you were involved in crafting, say, legislation. I'm just curious, as a not really newbie, but somebody interested in this process, how much of what is in front of us comes from wording in the legislation versus discretion, if you will, on the part of OSHPD? Is it all OSHPD coming up with these suggested regulations, or is some of this in the newly signed law?
Do you want me to make a stab at that, Bill?
Yes, please.
Basically, what the law asked us to do is define the requirements and where it can be used. That was the big thing. Is previously, as Bill was saying, then not only wasn't any requirements, but the licensing for it was prohibited to be in a 1R building. So it's a kind of a dual approach to correcting that, because we always assumed that these could be provided in these buildings. We found out through working with Sutter and through the legislation on this, that they weren't allowed. So what we did, the law only states that we have to develop the standard. So what we did, we developed the standards and we vetted them through 2 cycles of the Hospital Building Safety Board Codes and Processes Committee with people there. And we met with some specialists in the field as well and reviewed this with people that specialize in chemical dependency recovery hospitals. And that's how this was developed.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Sudhir?
Yes, the word CDR is okay, but the hospital, at one time you're saying hospital should not be included. It should be maybe area or something like that instead of the word hospital.
I guess the actual term for these are chemical dependency recovery hospitals, but by definition, they're not licensed hospitals.
Right.
That's part of the confusion that was there. Now, we were always allowed to put chemical dependency units in hospitals in the past. There's, as Bill said, there was no requirements for it. Most of these are residential units, but they've always been called chemical dependency recovery hospitals. And that was part of the contention with the law, was they're not licensed as hospitals. So now that's not a term that we have any control over, but I understand what you're saying. And it's a good point, but it's something that we can't change. That's always been there as that is part of the law. They're not licensed that way though. Bill, did you want to
Recognize myself. So I do want to add a commentary point or two here. So I've always wondered what something like the Betty Ford Clinic or others that I've seen on late night commercials for chemical dependency treatment centers, again, they don't fit in any other categories in the code. The building officials that have jurisdiction worked out whatever they worked out. I don't know what it was on each of those, but we have found on our end, as things are, you get paid for what you do in our field. You try to go bill for treating somebody, and the powers that be say they've got a box we have to fill for a medical treatment. Well, this is not medical treatment. So there is a whole other but related topic on how do you invoice for these kind of things, because it's not medical in its nature. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, the second comment which I have is on page 25, 1229 1311, part 2.
Okay.
Most of other places I can understand about the grandfathering in of the old places where we allowed 100 feet, but here it is 120. And should we change it to 110? I mean, what is the right number? Whether it is 120 seems to be arbitrary.
This,
If
this,
it was 110, I can understand it is consistent with the other areas.
yeah, this is a activity room, not a patient room.
Right. So is it 120, 130, 150, or it could be any number? And how did we arrive at 120? That's
It's
what
what's
I mean.
required in a psychiatric
Okay.
facility. We try not to be arbitrary. We go,
That's what I was gonna just pick the number, okay, 120 or 140, 160, whatever number it is.
no,
I thought it was if it was 110, I had no question. I would. Let's see what else. A lot of material.
Yeah, most of these based on the number of beds would be greater than 120. If you get 25 foot. per bed.
These, the COVID area, where will that come into play on all these things?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
COVID.
Oh,
Where will that fit
not
into
going
any? Is that part of the CDR or no?
no,
Yeah.
no. CDRs are not,
Okay.
they would be removed.
Okay. Then on the page 29, the toilet room shall be located no more than 150 feet from the bedroom. Again, the 150, where did that come from? That supposed to be 100 feet, or other places it was 100 feet and this here 50. That's 1229, 32, 2.2.
Yeah, it would be, I'm double checking, but I believe it's the same, matches that in a psych facility.
Okay.
Yeah,
The last,
it's identical to the psych facility.
okay. So a lot of this definition on the CDR, should that go into the front end of the OSH part or some other section? I don't know, just.
It's going to be its own section, section
Okay.
1229.
Okay,
Fortunately, we had that previously reserved.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the committee? So if the public has any comments, please get in the queue now.
There are no hands raised and there are no phone participants.
All right, and then we'll come back to the committee. Could we get a motion for item 18?
I believe Renee, you had some comment which you want to change one word or something. Yeah.
So, no, that, I think that was Bill. So this is David Field. I'd like to approve with the amendation to change psychiatric to chemical dependency in the definitions. And that would be based on item 6, that the current definition is vague. So that's what I'd like to move.
Okay, and what section is that under?
That was in definitions, I believe.
Yeah, I think we need to refer for the record, I guess. On page 23 at the top.
Correct.
Mhm. Okay, I second it.
Any comments from the committee? Okay, here again, let's go to a vote. I'm going to abstain.
I will call you anyway, so that you can say that. Bill Zelman,
Abstain.
David Field,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
1 abstain and the 4 in favor, motion carried.
So I assume similar to what we did with part one, we'll entertain a motion to approve all of the items 1 through 18 of part two.
Volume 1.
I'm sorry.
So move. Move to approve item 1 through 18 on part 2, volume 1.
Seconded.
Any comments? Hearing none. Let's go to a vote.
Bill Zelmer,
Approve.
David Phil,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone,
Approve.
make motion carried.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a lot to learn today.
Let me check in with the staff at the Building Standards Commission. Before we adjourn, is there any other business we need to take care of?
No, if I could take a moment through the chair, this is Mia Marvelli, Executive Director. Yeah, I just, first of all, appreciate your leadership in chairing this committee. And I want to remind everyone that, this is the second phase of your duty as the Code Advisory Committee members. We reconstitute the Code Advisory Committees every 3 years. And we use them for the triennial cycle, which was done 18 months ago. And then, of course, we do it again for the intervening, which is where we're at right now. And so the key here is your expertise is greatly relied upon for reviewing the regulations for their technical merit. And so we really appreciate your volunteering your time to review the extensive code changes. And I would encourage all of you to please apply again when we open up the call for applications, which most likely will be later this year, much later this year. That's usually when we do it, is fall before the triennial code cycle. And of course, we're always here if you have suggestions on improvements to the process or the materials that you're provided. We're happy to consider that and make changes in the future. So we appreciate your input. And thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you.
I believe the last order of business is to adjourn. So I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, do you have to do an official?
Yeah.
So Bill Zelmer,
I approve.
David Phil,
Approve.
Renee Amy,
Approve.
Sadir Agrawal,
Approve.
Michael Stone.
Approve.
Okay, motion carried. We're done.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
CBS
everyone.
staff, the CBST staff was very helpful. I asked for the documents in the Word format and they provided it in a very timely manner. So it helped me out a lot. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, all.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Bill.